What's up everybody, Commander Sanctum here, and today we have a brand new deck tech using Narset Jeskai Waymaster. Narset is a 3/4 human monk for blue, red, white that says at the beginning of your end step you may discard your hand. If you do, draw cards equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn. Narset has a very interesting ability. Obviously, the more spells you can cast in a turn, the better it will get. There's a few different ways we could probably go about this, from cheap creatures to a Cheerios themed artifact deck. But the one I think works the best is straight up Spellslinger. Jeskai, that is red, white, and blue color pairing, has quite the tool set when it comes to Spellslinger cards, and is probably one of the better 3 color pairs that can do it. Let's take a look at a few of those cards in the card highlights. One of the potential win cons in a Spellslinger deck like this is tokens. There are quite a few cards in the Jeskai color pairing that will create a creature token whenever you cast certain types of spells. Kaikar Wind's Fury is another type of Jeskai Spellslinger commander that, naturally, fits very well in a Narset deck, since it creates a creature token on a non-creature spellcast. Third Path Iconoclast and Monastery Mentor also create tokens whenever you cast a non-creature spell, with the Monastery Mentor's tokens even having prowess, making them progressively bigger the more spells you cast in a turn. There are also a number of cards that create tokens whenever an instant or sorcery is specifically cast. Young Pyromancer is one of the most well-known ones, making 1/1 elementals, while Talran Sky Summoner is a commonly used mono-blue commander for Spellslinger, since he makes 2/2 flying drakes on a spellcast. We also have Murmuring Mystic as a sort of combination of the two, making 1/1 birds that have flying. The other most common win condition in a Spellslinger deck is straight up damage. Just like the token generation cards, there are quite a few that will do damage to opponents whenever you cast a spell. Of the non-creature variety, we have Firebrand Archer, Kessig Flamebreather, and Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch, all doing 1 damage to all of your opponents on cast. The Flamer even lets you get a spell back from the graveyard on upkeep, potentially letting you cast an additional spell during that turn that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. For instant or sorcery specific, we have Fiery Inscription and Gutter Snipe, both dealing a massive 2 damage per spellcast. These are going to be the most efficient cast payoffs we have access to, as a consistent 2 damage per spell really adds up quickly. There's also Erebor Flamesmith, which, while only doing 1 damage per spell, still can add up quickly if you can rifle off multiple spells in a turn. Now for the actual spells to trigger these win con cards. Since we want to cast as many spells as we can in a turn to maximize Narset's ability, we want to use cheap spells that can be cast one after another. Thankfully, since we have access to blue, we have a ton of 1-mana spells that we can use that even replace themselves by drawing a card. Consider, Opt, and Brainstorm are all such examples at instant speed, which can be relevant if we want to get some extra tokens created or damage to our opponents while not on our turn. At sorcery speed, we have Ponder, Preordain, and Serum Visions, all having Scry or Scry adjacent, and drawing us a card. And while we normally would want to empty our hand to maximize Narset's ability, these spells, and the previous ones, replacing themselves is actually beneficial, as it may get us access to more cheap spells that we can continue to cast on that turn. Gitaxian Probe is excellent in any Spellslinger deck, as it's essentially going to always be free mana-wise, since spending a paltry 2 life is nothing compared to getting an extra spell cast in the spell count. For non-blue cards, we have Thrill of Possibility and Faithless Looting. Faithless Looting is particularly great since it has flashback, letting us potentially get 2 spellcasts in a turn, all for a small 4 mana. Since we don't want to 100% rely on Narset's ability, we also have cards that will draw us a card whenever a certain type of spell is cast. Whirlwind of Thought is the Jeskai Spellslinger staple, drawing a card whenever a non-creature spell is cast. Archmage Emeritus does the same thing as well, though specifically for instants or sorceries. There's also Case of the Ransacked Lab that has the same ability as the Archmage, but also makes instants and sorceries 1 mana cheaper. While a lot of our spells are already 1 mana and therefore won't benefit from this reduction, there will naturally be some that will cost more, making this added benefit on the case all gravy. I also wanted to point out some good removal options that we can quickly fire off on our turn if we're planning on using Narset's ability. Swords to Plowshares, and the equivalent Path to Exile, are obvious mentions here, being the best targeted creature removal pretty much in the entire game. We also have Pongify, which while not as good as Swords, still is an effective way to take out a creature for a single mana. Wear and Tear is an excellent option for artifacts or enchantments, since even choosing both modes is still only a cheap 3 mana total. Counterspells can be another great way to add to your spell count, while also protecting your best pieces on the board, like Narset herself. An Offer You Can't Refuse and Swansong are great 1-mana counter options, with a relatively small downside for either. Dovin's Veto is going to be the best counterspell we can use, since it itself can't be countered. Sure, it can only counter non-creature spells, but I'm a big proponent of counters being used against instants and sorceries, especially things like removal or board wipes, so this isn't too big of a deal. Finally, we have a number of utility cards that work well with the themes of our deck. First up, we have a number of cards that work great with instants and sorceries specifically. Mizzix's Mastery and Past in Flames are both great ways to get access to the spells we've already cast, letting us cast them again for their mana cost in the case of Past in Flames, or for free in the case of Mizzix's Mastery. Mizzix in particular is great, since you do actually cast the spells, meaning they will trigger all of our WinCon effects. This is unlike Thousand Year Storm, which only copies the spell and does not actually cast them. While this still triggers something like Magecraft on Archmage Emeritus, this would not trigger our win condition effects. It's still an extremely powerful effect, however, so it's worth including in the deck. Poppet Stitcher is another instant or sorcery based token generation effect on the front, but it really shines when it's flipped to Poppet Factory. Poppet Factory makes all creature tokens a base power of 3/3, which will be very good since most of our tokens will naturally be 1/1s. This can be a bit of a non-bow with some tokens, like the Monastery Mentor tokens that have prowess, but outside of these specific situations, this card will absolutely shine. And hey, if you get into that situation, you can always flip the factory back if you want. Roar of Resistance gives all of our tokens haste, letting us attack as soon as they are created, while also letting us pump them up to 3 power for 2 mana. This ability can even be used on opponents' creatures on their turns, making for a good political card. Finally, Boros Charm is an all-around great card since it's modular, and only costs 2 mana. You'll most likely be using it for its indestructible mode, but has other good uses in cases where you just need to cast another spell in a turn. Here's an example deck list utilizing all the previously mentioned cards. Additional cards include more cheap spells to cast like Impulse and Sleight of Hand, additional win condition cards like Saheeli's Sublime Artificer and Electrostatic Field, and more great utility in Jeskai Ascendancy and Stormkiln Artist. As soon as Narset was revealed, I knew that I wanted to make a Spellslinger deck with her. One of the biggest downsides with Spellslinging is that you can empty your hand in a single turn, and then do nothing for the next few as you try to slowly rebuild your hand. The more cards you have, the more spells you can cast, meaning you really want to always have as full of a grip as possible. Narset helps solve this problem, since she can instantly refill your hand after a turn of spellcasting. The best part about her ability is that it's a May, meaning you aren't forced to discard your hand unless you actually want to. This actually does make a huge difference, since it lets you only discard and draw when it's actually advantageous to you. While she herself doesn't have a win condition ability like some of the other Jeskai Spellslinger commanders, I think she more than makes up for it by being a great value engine. Speaking of other Jeskai Spellslingers, I've been debating with myself where she would rank against the other powerhouses like Kaikar Wind's Fury or Elsha of the Infinite. Both of these are win cons in their own right, with Kaikar being especially good since you can sacrifice the generated tokens to make mana to cast more spells. But I don't think Narset's extreme value should be overlooked. Sure, she won't be able to win you the game outright, but she'll give you the cards you need to continually be spellslinging on each of your turns. Honestly, I think that may be more valuable than being a win con, since card draw is so important in Magic, but only time and getting some games in will tell. I hope you enjoyed watching this deck tech on Narset Jeskai Waymaster. The full deck list outlined in this video can be found at the Architect link at the top of the description. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to drop a like and comment, as well as subscribe to the channel for more Magic content. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.